Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for OPE, let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who wanna go, gonna glow.
Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast, the podcast where Iowa Joe and I, unlike the Packers, are putting in our best effort on Week 17 reviewing this game. But Joe, that was about as wet fart of a game as we've seen from this team all season. I know that they kind of made it exciting at the end, but I mean, sort of a repeat, and we'll go into this when we get into our points, but it's really a repeat of each one of their losses this season where they just haven't been ready to go at the opening snap for a game against one of their better competition, and all of their bad mistakes and worst traits came to the forefront. But yeah, like, it was disappointing how it ended. I liked how they fought at the end, but how did you feel about this game?
It was basically the same game as week whatever it was, 4. Is that
Yeah.
when that's played? 4. It was basically a repeat of that whole game. You know, they look like crap going into halftime, then coming out of halftime, they have a little bit of life, and then it just kind of puttered out. So just kind of playing mind reader here. I don't think we're going to have a lot of fresh takes this week.
No. But just off the bat, so the biggest news coming out of this game is, two things. So the first one, from an injury standpoint, Devontae Wyatt suffered a concussion, and it looked like Edgerrin Cooper had some kind of ankle or foot or shin injury late that play where it kind of looked like maybe they had forced a fumble, and he didn't go for the ball, and then you saw afterward he's grabbing at his foot. But I don't think he or LaFleur commented on it after the game, so you just hope he's okay. Otherwise, I think the Packers got out of this one pretty... Oh, and Zane Anderson got concussed on the first kick return or kick coverage.
Yeah, that was nasty.
I know, that was really unfortunate. That's one of those you really hate to see that. I know we've had...
And I know we haven't been we're not the biggest Zane Anderson fans.
But
you
we
never
really
want to
hope
see
he's
that
okay.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
No, you don't want to see a guy crumple like that on impact. That's just never the thing you want to see. So we really hope Zane's okay. Didn't see the play. Devontae got his bell rung on, but you hope he's all right. And just adds injury to insult coming out of this one. But yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but I seem to... this old age is kicking my ass for my memories and not the greatest anymore, but I seem to remember a play that I think it was like a run play, and Wyatt was on the ground, and then when he got up, he was kind of stumbling, but he ended up playing that next snap and then went out, and then you never saw him after that. So I want to say that's what I saw. So if anybody knows any bit different, then they can let us know, but I'm pretty sure that's what I saw.
And if that is the case, that's really disappointing, because that's the whole point of the fucking third-party observer. They're supposed to spot that kind of stuff, and I've seen them stop games for less than that. So if that is the case, that's disappointing. But like you said, let's see if we can scrape together one fresh thought between the two of us.
Ooh, I gotta hit the button, don't I?
Fresh cheese.
I gotta say, Romeo stepped up. I've said all year that Romeo has seemed to be loves, even going back to last year, Romeo seemed to be Jordan's safety valve. So when things kind of fall apart, he's always looking for Romeo. 7 catches on 11 targets, 58 yards, no tuts, and a long of 18. And he was fighting for yards, so you gotta love what you see out of Romeo. Going back to that draft, I have to say Romeo was probably my favorite wide receiver out of the group. I mean, obviously Christian was the most exciting, but Romeo was how do I want to say? And in my eyes, Romeo was the prototypical Packer wide receiver. He was solid as a athletic guy, but he was the blue collar, blue chip type of wide receiver that he's jack of all trades. You know, he wasn't good. He wasn't great at one thing, but he was good at everything. And, you know, we're really seeing that. It's going to be a really hard decision. What is it at the end of next year when it comes time for contracts? You know, are they going to keep both Watson and Dobbs? Or are they going to, you know, let one walk and keep the other? That's going to be a super hard decision. Somebody's, you know, a lot of fans are going to be upset about it at some point because I honestly don't know if they're going to be contract wise. Or I mean, salary cap wise, they should be able to keep both, but realistically, are they going to keep both? You know, that's gonna be the thing. So yeah, my first one's got to be Romeo because he seemed to be the only wide receiver. Well, I won't say that because the rest of the guys, I don't think there was a. We'll get into it later on, but I think out of Romeo, he rose to the top of things.
Yeah, like no drops. His missed targets were just missed throws, not anything where he like blew it or anything like that. And you and I have both kind of gone on how we think that Romeo is the guy who does the most like traditional wide receiver things and allows Watson to be a deep threat and play off of his deep speed and allows Jaden Reed, who I think we'll both get into later in this show, allows Jaden Reed to be really he's a big play threat, but it's more as like a gadget secondary, like kind of like almost like a magic trick, like the student body left and oh, there goes Jaden going right kind of thing and stuff. So and I know he's had he had the one game thing this year and he's had a couple unfortunate drops and stuff in certain points and had the concussion, but realistically, Dobbs has been the most consistent guy when it's a crucial down and distance situation that when Love goes to him, he's the guy that has come through. And just going through the contract stuff, like you said, we're a year out from really having to worry about this stuff. But I'll say it again that Dobbs is the one that you could, I think, most realistically get to sign an extension with this offseason because, and my reasoning for that is he's the guy that, like you said, he's not the big play guy. He's not the sexy athlete or, the explosive athlete or the super, sexy statistical guy, but he's the guy that you're like, okay, Romeo, we're going to reward you for what you've done throughout your 3 years, the chemistry you've built with Jordan. you know, they won't say it, but they're not going to give him like a top of the market deal or anything like that. But it'll be a quote unquote fair deal that gives him security moving forward and gives the team security that this is a guy who hasn't really missed games in his career, and that's a big thing for the Packers moving forward.
The only thing that I'll say is what really is going to hurt the wide receivers is what was it, 2 years ago with the Christian Kirk and those type of guys
Yeah,
getting the massive contracts.
yeah,
So that's going to be the jumping point when it comes to these guys when
yeah,
it comes to the contract years. So like I said, by the salary cap, there should be no issues with bringing
yeah.
both of them back. But realistically, are they going to want to pay those guys,
Right.
the type of money that they're going to, if the Christian Kirk and that type of wide
Yeah.
receiver is setting the bar for it?
And that's the only reason why if I had to pick between those two 2022 draft picks, I'd pick Dobbs to sign an extension this offseason because he's the guy you can Watson is going to bet on himself. He'd be stupid not to bet on himself and say like, no, I haven't had that year because of injuries, because of this, and then because of injuries last year, and then this year it was Love's injury and all that kind of stuff. So, there's a what is he like back to the bye week? He has like 450 yards on 20 catches or something like that. So it and he seems to have gotten the hamstring issues figured out. This is a different one, and it's not great that he has a track record that he does, but if they really did figure out the soft tissue issues, the soft tissue injuries, which it seems like they did, that's the reason why I have him saying like, no, I'm gonna hold on, play out 2025, and get a deal at the end of that season as a free agent. Whether it's the thing Green Bay does where they sign a guy like with 2 weeks to go in the regular season, or you go to actual free agency and re-sign him, or he gets a big deal somewhere else. So that's the only reason I've got it that way. But like you said, those are problems for future Joe and future Mike to talk about. But I agree. Like, you have to like the fight that Dobbs showed. I hope he's okay. I think he did go back in the game afterward, but he kind of got dinged up on that one last reception he had where it kind of looked like, or no, not the reception, but when he tried to dive for that throw up the sideline from Love. But yeah, it's not the most efficient game, but he had a couple plays where he got chopped down for like a couple yard gain by just some really nice defensive plays. So it wasn't really his fault, but for the most part, caught stuff that was coming his way and did the thing. So my fresh that I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel for is kind of in line with Dobbs, and it's that this team didn't do shit for the most part for the first 2.5 quarters of this game, but and I know a lot of people outside of the room are gonna say like, oh, it was fake hustle or it was prevent defense or whatever kind of thing, but I don't buy that shit at this point because of what Minnesota was playing for today and next week. The number one overall seed in the NFC is on the line for them. So I don't buy for a second that you can say like they took their foot off the gas. If anything, the whole reason that Valentine is even in position to get that interception is because Minnesota's like, no, we're gonna like stomp the lights out on them. We're gonna keep throwing, and damned if we do, damned if you don't, kind of thing. And credit to Carrington, credit to Carl Brooks for bailing Carrington out on that play and saving him from giving the ball right back. But it was still a really good play via Valentine. It was almost the same as his interception against Seattle. Great hustle by Carl Brooks. Like we said, the effort to get back in this game, get it within 2 point. The irony that it was again a 2 point defeat where you couldn't get the ball back at the end of the game. But that's one thing. And I know some will say like, oh, he's not converting the opportunities to for comeback wins, but it's a lot of people are gonna not be happy with me saying this, but there's a discernible difference between a Jordan Love team getting down early and a Rodgers team getting down early, where it's like with Rodgers, you would just look at his eyes and like when when the camera would pan on him, whether he's on the sideline or when he's in the huddle, and he just had his own version of a deer in the headlights look, and you're like, oh, okay, like he's toast, like he's doesn't got it, and all he's gonna do is dig deeper into his worst habits of like holding the ball, like just throwing it away and like avoiding interceptions and all that kind of crap. Whereas with Love, it's like, yeah, sure, it's not pretty, it's not going to be aesthetically pleasing, but he's just going to fire away. And sometimes he's got enough bullets in the gun and sometimes he doesn't, and today he just didn't quite have enough ammo in his back pocket. But I do think that's where this team, for the most part, teams go to the beat of their quarterback, their leader, and you do see that feistiness, and you just wish you saw it earlier in the game. But like, it deserves some praise that they just didn't roll over and die when they easily could have at this point, at a certain point in the game.
Well, to start the game, it looked like the defense was going to be, like it had been, like the last few games wasn't a fluke by any means. But I really think, and I know we keep saying this, but we'll get into it a little bit later. But with the offense not holding up their end of the job, the defense just kept getting tired because they had to keep running back out there. They had to keep running back out there. Now that doesn't excuse everything because, like I said, we'll get into a lot more of this later. But it did seem like the only two players of well, I'll add a third one in there when after I say that or when I put my next fresh in. But the only couple players that seemed like they really showed up for the whole game was Carrington and Carl Brooks. Carl had a pass defense, he had a tackle for loss, he had a QB hit, he had a sack. he had 3 total tackles, and he had that heads up
The
play on
bailout.
recovering the
Yeah.
yeah, that recovery. And then, you know, Carrington, couple tackles, a couple, or he had a pass defense, and then obviously the interception. Although it looked like he could have took it all the way if he would have just paid attention a little bit more. But then again, you question it because had he got a little bit further down there, would Carl have been there to be able to bail his ass out if he fumbled it? But anyway, that's a hindsight 2020 type thing. But it's really great to see Carrington really step up. Who would have thought last year in the draft, taking this kid in the 7th round, we'd be talking about him as the number 2 guy on the team behind Jair, but when Jair's not out there, the number 1 guy on the team. I love the kid coming out. I wish we would have got his running mate from college, Andrew Phillips, but he ended up in with the Giants, and as far as I know, he was playing pretty well with the Giants there for a while. But yeah, Carrington and Carl. Oh, I didn't grab it. I did get my picture back from Waukesha Sports Cards, my crack dealer of choice, of the blocked field goal against Chicago. So maybe that brought in some good luck for Carl Brooks, and he signed it, and then I had him put just the tip on as an inscription. So maybe that brought him some luck that I got that in. But yeah, those there's 4 guys, but 3 that I can talk about freely. Cooper's the other one that showed up, but the other guy that's probably not going to get a lot of talk about, probably is not going to get a lot of praise. If anything, he's going to get a lot of hate. And I don't think it's deserved. I think people are just basing it off the defense as a whole, and something we'll talk about later, and that's Eric Stokes. I thought he played well. Obviously he's not playing superstar well, but he's playing well enough to be a starter. I can't think of any off the top of my head where he was the one that gave up anything. There are a few moments, and I pointed it out on Blue Sky, that it wasn't his fault. It was the scheme where, again, it's a soft cover zone. You have 3 guys in the area, big catches made, 3 guys in the 5 yards off, and Stokes ends up being one of them. So instead of these guys going after, or these people going after, like Xavier McKinney for not being there, or one of the others, they're going to pick on Stokes because he's the easy target because of the struggles he's had in the past. But overall, I think Stokes played well. And then those 4 guys right there are the main ones that seem to want to play this full game.
Yep. So I don't got much more than that. Are you good? I'm good to move on.
I mean, you can throw in Jacobs in there. That's got to be a week to week thing, just because he's basically been this offense for so long. So yeah, you can throw Josh Jacobs in the fresh pile.
But yep. So
What's the
I'm
stale
good. If
shit?
you're good.
I wish that was
What's
a
the
little bit
stale
better.
shit?
No.
Stale wise, there's probably going to be more in the Moldy because of this week.
Yeah.
But stale wise, I'm going to throw. Let's throw Jaden in the stale. He could easily put it in the Moldy for this week, but I'll put him in the stale for this week, just because I can't blame everything on him. Obviously, some of the throws that were made towards him weren't the best throws. But what is the thing that they say about receivers in the NFL? If it hits you in the hands, you need to come down with it. And at least twice it hit him in the hands and he didn't come down with it. Yes, the type of catch it was, they were, a lot of diving attempts or kind of, but it still hit him in the hands, and by all things, hit you in the hands, you're supposed to come down with it, and he didn't.
And let me just put this on top of it, and he would have gone in my moldy pile for one other reason. But if this is your supposed wide receiver one that a lot of Packers fans trumpet around, catch the fucking ball. Like, and I tweeted it, and I think, I can't remember if I skied it or tweeted it, but the reason his drops don't get highlighted as much as Wicks or Watson's in the past, or even some of Dobbs early this season, is he makes enough big splashy plays, and he's still like, Packers fans are still in the honeymoon phase, because while he is their like leading receiver, he still doesn't get the target share that a lot of people think he should. But honestly, it's games like today that prove that, like I said, he's a really good player, but that's why I view him as more of a gadget player than like a true bona fide number one target. Because yes, he has the explosives. He has some really flashy highlights this season. The touchdown against the Eagles in week 1, the big pass play against the Rams in week 5. There's a lot of other ones. But he also has some mind numbing drops that have just killed the offensive rhythm. The fourth down drop today, was it low? Sure. Is a number one wide receiver supposed to catch that? Every fucking time. He had the other one where people were saying like, "Oh, it should have been DPI." Catch the ball, like save yourself the trouble. I just catch the fucking ball. Certain people were commenting on like, "Oh, what's the difference between Addison and Reed and blah 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 and all that kind of stuff." It's like, well, according to what I saw today, Jordan Addison caught 6 of 8 today. So that's a 75%, and one of them was like way over his head, so uncatchable. And I think the other one was like, oh, the other one was the one that Keyshawn made the nice play to rake it out of his hands in the end zone. So, okay, like, maybe he had one he could have brought in. Reed had 2 that he just flat out dropped. And like I said, this is a pattern that not a lot of people want to talk. Falls down against the Seahawks a couple weeks ago and loses a drive there. Has a pretty meh drop against the Lions that wouldn't have converted, but did, it created a 3rd and long when it could have been like 3rd and 2 or something. I think he had the one against the Colts, it was in the beginning of the season, where he just flat out drops a 3rd down conversion that was an easy throw from Willis. And then the first Vikings game, he has that bad drop at the end of the half where it would have been a big play to get the offense moving. And like I said, it's stale in this sense where he makes enough really good plays that it offsets his bad plays. But if this team is going to go anywhere, and if he wants to elevate himself, and a lot of people are like, he's the for sure re-sign guy. I'm like, one, he's got to stay healthy. He's been healthy this year, but he gets dinged up a lot. And 2, he's got to be more consistent overall. Like, he's like at 53 receptions out of 73 targets, which is not bad, but it should be better. He's got a lot of easy ones. We talked about a lot of the ones on like those quick swing plays where it's like he like looks upset that he didn't get the ball, but it's like you should have caught it and stuff. But the one that tipped it for me and would have put him in the moldy is, I asked the question again. If you're going to fair catch every punt when you have double team blockers in front of you, put Keyshawn, put any fucking one else back there. He's done that like 5 times this season in do or die moments. And I know the Packers ended up going down the field and scoring the touchdown to make it 25-27 at that point. But like, you could hear Burkhardt's jaw hit the floor when he waved for the fair catch, because Burkhardt kind of bites his tongue and does the like, he had room. Like,
Well, they both did. Him and Brady did. But to go back to something that you said, a lot of people aren't going to jump on it and whatever because of, it goes back to what I said about Eric Stokes. They're going to see the plays like, okay, well, one of the catches for Addison, there were 3 guys, or not Addison, Naylor. There were 3 guys around him, but they were playing soft coverage. Nobody was on him. He was wide friggin' open. But they're not going to go after Xavier McKinney for it. They're not going to go after, I can't think of who the other was, it Keyshawn that was in there with them. They're going to go after the guy that, quote unquote, makes all the mistakes in Eric Stokes, when actually he's not the one in the mistakes. And then the same thing is the reverse with Jaden Reed. They're not going to go after him right now because of all the quote unquote good things he's done so far this season when he does something dumb. So it's fickle fans.
Yeah.
I'm not talking
And
about Badgers fickle. I'm talking about fickle.
so that's a good one. My stale one is just going to be just one of the things that we talked about a lot at the beginning of the season is the mistakes that this team makes in the they've they've curtailed them recently toward as they went on what is it 5 of 7 wins or whatever or 6 of 8 wins 5 of 7 or yeah whatever it is out of the bye they're doing better but that's the thing is when they've played good teams the really good teams their 5 losses all of their mistakes have been amplified because a average to bad team can't take advantage of mistakes whether it's a tipped pass a Josh Jacobs fumble you know we can talk all about how bad the offsides call on the field goal was. I know that'll go in the moldy, but again, just any sort of mistake, and the Packers just their opponent when they played the Vikings twice, the Lions twice, and the Eagles, their opponent has taken advantage of every single one of them. So, like I said, they're not all in the Packers' control, but you can't fumble on your opening drive when you have momentum going. You can't drop the ball on 4th down when it's a LaFleur calls a really great play. Love makes a really good throw, and you drop a like we said, not picture perfect pass, but it's a damn good pass, and it should be an easy conversion. And it it's just the things that you can't do in a game that and like we said going into it, the Vikings have so much more to play for than the Packers did and all that kind of stuff. But that game
Well, I
was there
kind
for
of
Green Bay to
disagree
take it.
with you on that point. You've said that a couple times, and I kind of disagree with you on that point because the Packers are still playing for seeding. I know it's not necessarily, oh, well, they'll get the number one seed, but, there's a difference between seventh, sixth, and fifth seed. They could have easily slotted into the fifth seed had they won this game. And, who knows, maybe they could even went to fourth seed by winning out the next two games. But now losing this game, the top that they're going to get is the sixth seed, and
Yeah,
so I get what you're saying that yeah they've already clinched their playoff berth, and there's it's nothing major, but it did mean something if they would have won
yeah,
today's game.
that's fair. I just the way they played today, the way that they kind of came into this game. This was going to be my other still one, so I'll just say it now. They just didn't look super engaged to start that, and I think that led into some of the mistakes, led into some of the still, poor execution early in the first half and stuff, and they just felt like they were kind of on autopilot coming into this one, and it was disappointing because, like you said, from a fan perspective, I agree with you. There was a lot for them to play for in terms of maneuvering around their 5, 6, 7 seeding. They looked like a team that was like, we're nursing some injuries, so let's just play this game. Maybe we'll catch lightning in a bottle and win it and stuff. But we don't really care who we face. Like I know that you can't draw all those conclusions, but it very much felt like that's what they're saying. And even some of the post game stuff, either it's kind of like the tone was, oh well, it was disappointing, but we just want to get some momentum next week so we're ready for the playoffs. And it's like, oh, like okay, like maybe it's not totally what you guys were thinking, but I kind of have a feeling of where your guys' heads were at, and it kind of showed with how you guys came out for this game. And it's mostly disappointing that, like you said earlier in this episode, this game played out almost the same as the first Vikings game, but instead of the 3 Love interceptions, it was the Jacobs fumble, the dropped 4th down pass, and just stale offense the rest of the first half. And you get down in a hole, you're down 20-3, 27-10, and it's you almost come back. Like I said, I like the fight at the end, but it's like I wish you had that intensity to start the game.
For sure. And I thought the same thing, that they just really seemed off today, and it just I don't know what it was. So I'll just kind of go into my stale. I've got a couple that easily could be Moldy's, but because of past experience, and the main one is the Jacobs fumble, because it's more really weird than, it I mean, I can fully understand if you wanna put it in Moldy, and that could, we could slide into Moldy with it, but it was really weird because it wasn't punched out. It you know
He wasn't. It wasn't like the Seattle or even the Colts one where he like was holding the ball. I know Brady said it was loose, but it wasn't like it was flailing out away from him. That was, that was a defense gets paid to play football too kind of one. And it's like I said, that's why I agree with you. I had it more in my stale. It was more the like that happened. You drop the fourth down pass, all that kind of, and it is just becomes an item in the list of things you made mistakes on. But it's like,
Right.
yeah, it's like it's one of those where it's like, what do you want Jacobs to do? Just go down on first contact to like not be up to get. And so yeah, I agree with you.
Well, even then, if you look at it, he wasn't doing anything more than
Right.
he normally does. He was going down, it just somehow the ball
It's
came
because
loose.
it's because the one guy who was tackling him was a defensive lineman, and the way he punched over the top, like I said, I know Brady made the comment, and Brady was not good today, but Brady made the comment like,
Brady's a
"Oh, it's a little
dick.
loose," but um, it was more just unfortunate circumstance, and like the one guy who really could have made that play made it, and it was one of those where you're just kind of like, oh, like is it gonna be one of those games kind of days and stuff? So
Well,
yeah,
and the thing that could make it moldy is it seems like the offense just went south from there for the rest of the
yeah,
game. So, yeah, that's
yeah, and that's
I just
something that
completely forgot what my other stale was. So go ahead.
that's hopefully you'll figure it you'll remember it here, but that's something that I saw Dusty point out on Blue Sky, where he said like they've done a really great job establishing the run the past month, but it's almost to the detriment of the pass game, where they're so focused on getting the run going that they don't get Love in a rhythm. And it's like it's that whole, it's a delicate balance. Like obviously to establish the run you have to run the ball, but also you have a quarterback who's runs a little hot and cold at times. Like Love isn't the most precise passer and stuff, but yeah, like you could kind of just tell like they were searching for it after that fumble. And that's why I didn't have too much of a problem with kicking the first field goal, because you had struggled so hard to get down into scoring range that I thought you had to guarantee you came away with points at that point, because you had fumbled, you had the 3 and out after you forced the first punt by the Vikings, and then you got them to miss, short the 57-yard field goal, and so you couldn't come out of that, you know, if you count our drives, and there you couldn't come out of that 5 total drives with no points. And I know some people are like, "Oh, but you went for it later." But I'm like, you're on the road, you're the underdog, you're playing shorthanded, and it's like you've got to put points on the board and keep some semblance of momentum. It didn't work. That's just kind of what this game went, but I didn't really have a problem with kicking the field goal there.
No, and the other thing about the fumble is I put this out on Blue Sky also. This is unusual for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
This fumble right today for against the Vikings is his fourth of the season. That's a career high. His other
Yep.
career high was 3, and he's done that a few different times in his career. So it that's another reason why I put it more as a stale than a moldy, is because this isn't typical for him. But I did remember my other stale, and this is another one that could slot into moldy, but I give him a pass because of past performance, and that's the offensive line. They were getting beat up. They were holding up a little bit, but they still allowed 8 QB pressures and 3 sacks. And the run game, while did okay, wasn't up to normal procedures. I know Flores does a lot of exotic looks and rushes a lot of different things, but you know, they did not do what they needed to do today.
Yeah, what I saw and what factored into it is the Vikings were keying in on Myers, how he snaps the ball after, he takes his peek under the hood to look at Jordan. And what he's got to do, well, it's a two part or three stage, two stage, depending on how you view like LaFleur calling the play and Jordan getting in out of the huddle. But they've got to speed that side of it up so that Myers can kind of screw around with the silent count where instead of every time where it's like once he, goes from leaning to sitting back down to getting rid, sometimes he holds for us count instead of snapping it immediately because early in the game the Vikings were like when he sits down he's snapping the ball and they had a couple where Tom, Ryan, and Rashid got pushed back into Love because they're playing catch up because the Vikings are just shooting off the ball and they're just catching the defender instead of blocking, meeting him at the point of the attack. So that's one where it's like you need more efficient operation, getting the play in, getting out of the huddle and to the line of scrimmage, and then like I said, you set your protections and all that kind of stuff, and then you're giving Myers the ready for the snap with like 3 to 5 seconds instead of two or less, where it's like, oh shit, like I need the ball now kind of thing and stuff. So, yeah.
But I put that all on. I understand they have to do a lot of different things to disguise what they're calling because you can't just go out there and say, "All right, you're going to run a, oh, give me a play off the top of your head." Go out and run an out route. You can't do that. You have to go through and disguise it otherwise. But that's been a problem even with the McCarthy and Rodgers era,
Yeah.
where it seems like the play calls are so long, it takes them forever to do it in the huddle. That I know they've worked on a little bit to where they're not burning as many timeouts in like the first 5 minutes or whatever. But that is kind of a hindrance because, like you said, the offensive line still needs time to make its checks and make its
Yeah.
disguise a lot of things.
So yeah, so that's what I've got for
Take
today's
some moldy
game.
cheese.
Yeah. Where do you want to start with this one?
I think I'm going to go with one of the low hanging fruits, and I'm going to go Jordan. Yes, we just talked about how the offensive line was not holding up well, but some of the decisions he was making, some of the throws he was making, that was not what we had come to know of Jordan Love the last few weeks. This looked a lot like that first week 4 game when he was initially, he was still coming back from injury because some balls were too low, some were too high, some were way off the mark. And then I called it out on Blue Sky. Why are we doing this hero ball stuff? They were only down like 3 points, and he's out here trying to gain 20 yards on a third, a first and 10 or a 2nd and 8. He's trying to gain these friggin' massive yards. And it's like that. I understand that if it's open, but a lot of these throws you're making aren't open. Even dumbass Brady and what's his face called
Burkhardt.
it out on a couple of them where he threw it in way over the top of everything and it was in triple coverage or in double coverage, and it's like we don't need that. you know Hit your lower targets, run. And like I said on Blue Sky, I don't know if that's because of the calls that were being sent in from the floor. I don't know if that was just Jordan hoping something would happen, but I got to put it on Jordan a little bit because 19 of 30 for 185 yards and 1 TD, that's not good. And
Yeah.
the coach can't be the one out there throwing the ball for you or making the on the field decisions for you. You are the ones doing that stuff.
Yeah, and so I agree with you. Like, it wasn't a good game from Jordan. I veered more towards stale than moldy on this one. I agree. The 2 points in the game, the 2 inflection points where it really felt like I was also thinking, like, what's the game plan here? Was the second drive where they went 3-and-out after they forced the first Minnesota punt, and even that one, Wicks has to catch that one. I forget if it was the second down one or the third down one. I think it was the second down ball. He can't drop that one. Like, it wasn't, again, it wasn't a great throw, but you got to catch that ball. And he was 4 for 5, but that one miss was a drop in my book. And then the other one was the play after the erroneous illegal formation that was called on Wicks on the in the 2 minute drill. And then, so my moldy goes more towards, instead of just Jordan, I didn't care for LaFleur's game call in the first half because, and really, I think over the whole game, you only saw like 2 screens called, which is kind of suicidal against this defense, especially with how aggressive they were playing. And that second drive, I didn't understand why LaFleur was looking, especially like I said, with how they're trying to establish the run this out of the out of the bye, but also like out of the bye. Not only have they been establishing the run, but they've also been going with like a quicker hitting pass game. And it, for that second drive, for whatever reason, they like threw the kitchen sink out, like not at the Vikings, but they threw it out the back window. And then, like I said, that play on the third down after it got called back for the illegal formation, I know a lot of people are like, why do you throw it deep to Melton? But that route was horrible. It was like a partial mesh route, but everybody stopped and it was man. And it was like, okay. Like, and I think Jordan just kind of said, like, nothing's open short, so fuck it. And like, and I agree with you, like, that can't be the end result. But also, I understand because just at the look of how that play developed, I'm like, no one's there. Like, it's supposed to be, that one was supposed to be a decently, quick to intermediate hitting route, and nothing's there. So I wasn't too thrilled with what LaFleur did. I think he got a little shell shocked after the Jacobs fumble and was like, oh, like, instead of turning around and handing it right back to him, he's like, nah, let's like let him collect himself. And but where I feel like you said, Jacobs doesn't fumble that much for a guy who touches the ball as often as he does. And I know you can't really different, but as a runner, he's fumbled. This is the most he's fumbled, and all 4 of his fumbles have come as a runner this season. The seasons where he's had 3, only 2 have come on rushing plays. The other ones have come on, the third in each of those other 2 seasons has come on like a passing play. So I didn't understand that second drive, especially so deep in your own territory. Like, run the ball. Don't, not saying run, pass your way into a punt or anything like that, but like, get Jacobs going again. He was chewing up the Vikings on that first drive, and like you said, it was an unfortunate play. So yeah, I wasn't too thrilled with the first half play calling. I thought
Well, and
LaFleur
also
did.
you've got momentum because your defense just had a huge stop. And then for them to come out and just 3, straight deep passes off that on that drive that amounted to nothing. I just I didn't get it. And like I said, I'm not putting it all on Jordan,
Yeah, no,
but a
no.
lot of it is on Jordan because of the fact that he's out on the field and he's making.
And it's just, we're grading him hard because we expect a lot out from him. He's been playing so well, and I know it's hard to play at that level for that long. Like, that's why the run the table Rogers season was so special. And even last year, Toyotathon hit its bumps in the road. You had the Giants and the Bucks game in there that just was like, what the hell was that in the middle of it? But like, I agree with you. I expected better, and I know like on that drive, that was where Rashid really was struggling with how the Vikings were jumping the snap and stuff. But got to be better, and that's one of those, like, you got, as Lafleur, you have to see that faster. Like, I understand he's got a lot of things on his mind as the play caller, but that's the kind of thing that he's got to recognize quicker and adjust to make sure that it's not a repeatable problem. I,
And that's why
I
you also have an offensive coordinator and all these other coaches because they're supposed to be there helping
yeah.
you see that if you can.
But I've intentionally left the other low hanging fruit for this segment for you, so please take it away.
Well, the one that I'm thinking of, I can go off all. I already talked about it a little bit, and that's Hafley's soft coverage, friggin' jackass zone shit that we and I'm gonna call him out. I love you, Perone, but I am gonna call you out on this because I disagree with you full heartedly. And I let me pull it up real quick. So, and it's not like anything bad, but I disagree with the way with what you were saying. I I said, what's going on with the coverage? Three guys in the area, but they are like 5 yards off. Stop with the soft zone coverage. And Perone said they don't have any good corners out there. We're running on fumes, hopes and prayers. I get that, but you still have NFL corners out there. And my reply was basically, yeah, they're not number ones, but I personally could handle watching them being scorched on plays than three guys in the area with thumbs up their butts.
Yeah,
And that's basically what Hafley was running, was three in the area with thumbs up their butts. And we've seen that in Barry's system and it didn't work. We saw that earlier in the year with this system, it didn't work. You sometimes you just gotta, you know, throw it out there and take a chance. Carrington was playing well. Again, I point out Stokes, I think, has been playing better than what a lot of people are giving him credit for. Keyshawn, I think, was the weak link again. And other than that play against Addison, that was an amazing play that he made to break up that pass on that to Addison. But and Bullard was getting roughed up a bit, but give him a chance. Stokes has never been a zone coverage guy. He's always been the man-to-man type guy with the speed that he's had. Give him a shot. It couldn't be any worse than what they did already.
yeah.
Giving up 377 yards to Sam friggin' Darnold.
You can't, no matter what quarterback, you can't give him the same look every play, and that's where I agree with you on that point. Is like, I get, I do like you said, I do understand what Perone is trying to say, that like he doesn't have Jair, but this is something that we said earlier in the season where it's like, everyone knows that you're trying to cover for your corners because you don't have Jair and you're playing left-handed and all that kind of stuff. But you have to throw the curveball and the changeup every once in a while, whether that's calling a different zone coverage, calling bump and run on top of a zone coverage, or playing man, and like you said, just living with the outcome. And the first touchdown was the direct result of trying to layer in a soft zone with help behind it. And as much as everyone wants to say like, oh, it's because the corner suck, it's like, kinda, yeah, but you Halfley got so deep in the weeds of trying to like protect his corners that he let who was that, Naylor, just run right up the
Naylor.
middle of the
Yeah.
field. Yeah. And like, McKinney sees it like 4 steps too late because he's so helping and interested, which isn't a bad thing, but he's so overplaying the dig or slant that Jefferson is playing that he has no shot when Naylor runs a kind of like this lazy deep over route. It's not even a good route. It's just that they're expecting Green Bay to play so heavy in help coverage that like it's just beating a drum at that point. And so I agree with you that like you need to see something, you need to see some man coverage, and the pass rush does have to be better. But also at the same time, okay, my whole thing with that, everyone's like, oh my god, the pass rush. They were getting pressure early, and then the Vikings started to throw weird run looks at them. And so it's like, okay, like which one are you gonna? And sure, it's easy to say now, like, oh, you should have let them run the ball and made sure you just kicking the shit out of their O line and getting to Darnold. But no one would be happy if they average, they got 200 rushing yards and Jones had like 4 touchdowns and a 6 yard per carry kind of. They he had a long of 13 and they still held him to an average of 3.9 yards. You take out the kneel downs and they held the Vikings to a just over 3.1 yards per carry on the ground. I know that a lot of people don't give a shit about that stuff, but it does matter, and it does speak to why, like, And Paul Bretto made a big point about how, like, in this 4-3 defense, you're always playing at a numbers disadvantage, and it's not as simple as where is Rashawn? Why isn't Rashawn trying harder? Why isn't one of the things you brought up that I was a little disappointed was the interior rush that had been so good the past month dried up, except for Carl Brooks. Wyatt had a play here or there. Kenny had a play here or there in a pass rush, but there it just wasn't there. And I do think we're at the point where, and okay, and so this is where it goes hand in hand. So Quay is out. Hafley wants to use Cooper as a blitzer, but the problem is that when he blitzes Cooper, his two remaining linebackers can't cover. Wilson, again, for like the second time in 2 weeks, he's doing the best he can, but he's short. And Darnold throws the ball right over his head over the middle of the field. And McDuffie couldn't cover me in a phone booth right now. And so Hafley's kind of stuck where it's like, my ace in the hole in the pass rush is sending Cooper on a blitz, but I can't because the other two guys I've got out here are getting beat like a drum in coverage. So that side of it. And then, like you
And
said,
I question, where's Tyron Hopper? Are they not seeing him? I know he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, but he was active for the game.
yeah,
Is he not showing enough in practice to take a spot or even do a rotational with
yeah.
McDuffie or Wilson?
And it's to the point where I'm to the point with it where it's like, if you're playing a team like Minnesota that you know is going to throw the ball all over the yard when they have the chance to, you just got to live with him not having the right run fit, or if he runs the wrong way in coverage, because like I've been the guy that like McDuffie or Wilson has been, where that guy knows where he's supposed to be every play. That was the story of my high school careers. Mike knows where he's supposed to be on every play. He just can't fucking get there every time. Like, and like, bless their souls, Eric and McDuffie, they're two warriors. They've done, everything the team's asked them to, but
They're downhill guys. They're
yeah,
not out and
yeah,
about guys.
yeah. And you saw it later where Hafley was sending Wilson on some of the Cooper blitzes and you dropping Cooper into coverage. But at that point, like, Minnesota was throttling off and stuff. So this is where, like, as much as he's a whipping boy too, you need Quay back, because whether he's used to blitz instead of Cooper or he's dropping into coverage, him being 6'4" and lanky and athletic is a big upgrade over whatever Wilson or McDuffie, who are both 6 foot and 6'1", are giving you in the middle of the field. So you need that. And like you said, as much as some people are like, where's the pass rush? It's not as simple as, well, like, for all the like chest bumping, chest pounding, and flexing that Packers fans do about, like, oh, LaFleur does all these great things to create advantages in his game, by meshing his run and his pass game. O'Connell does that too. McVay does that too. Like, these other whiz kid offensive minds, they do that too. And for all the times that you're like, oh my god, like, yes, Green Bay's O line is better, but for all the times that it's like the Packers O line doesn't have to try, these other teams are doing it too, and Green Bay's team does have to think on the move and stuff. So it's not as simple as they're not good enough, they're not trying and stuff. You combine that with the handicaps in the secondary, the handicaps in coverage by the linebackers, you're playing with a hand, maybe a hand and a half tied behind your back. And that's why I said that for today, your offense had to be your best defense. And as we talked about, they just didn't get it done today. And honestly, that's why you lost the first game against the Vikings. That's why you lost. Really, all 5 of their losses are tied to slow starts by the offense. Week 1, you turned 2 early turnovers into 6 points instead of 10 or 14. The Vikings, you turned the ball over 2 times in the first half, 2 times in the first half, 2 times early in the second half. That really just stunt your ability to score points. The Lions game, you just never get off the ground. The game in Detroit, it takes you in a quarter and a half to get in the game. Today, it took you like 2.5 quarters to get in the game. So they've got to figure that out going into the playoffs. But yeah, that's kind of where they're at with that side
Yeah,
of
for
it.
sure. If this is the team that shows up in the playoffs, don't expect a long run out of them.
Nope.
I I don't know who it is off the top of my head, but they've mentioned it on, was it CD Angeli or was it somebody else on Blue Sky that said it, that for all those that think this is like 2010 all over again, it's more like 2009, where
Yeah,
they're on the cusp of things, but they're like a piece or two away from actually
yeah,
being that 2010 team.
yeah. I agree with. And Dusty had one that was similar to where he's like, it's whether it's what you think of the pass rush or the secondary, they're a year away from being a true contender. They can, on the back of how good this offense can be, they can fuck shit up, and they could they could screw around and make the Super Bowl because they are that talented on offense. And if their offense is playing up to a top three offense level, their defense has enough skill that they can create some turnovers. If they're playing ahead or even neck and neck, they can get pressure because you can not worry about the run as much. But when they're playing a dead even or from behind, it's hard for this defense to get the ball back for this off. That's just how this team is built. Like, it's you can't build for everything in the modern NFL. So that's kind of where they stand. My last one for Moldy is refs just suck. They're just horrible, terrible people. Like I said, if you go back and look at pictures or film of the supposed offside on the field goal at the end of the first half, the only person who's offside is the fucking right guard for the Vikings, who somehow is allowed to stand with his waist ahead of the football. And if you don't know what I'm, go look at a picture of the pre-snap, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's the ball." No, that's the right guard who somehow has his belt ahead of the ball. It's the long snapper is number 42. You can't see the ball because it's under his chest. 76 is somehow to his right, and like if if the long snapper looks to his right, he's all up in 76's business, and somehow Edge inching up to get closer to the line of scrimmage was viewed as him being offside. And I had someone on Twitter telling me like, "Are you blind? Inauguri is offside," and I'm like, "No, the ball is on the 42.5 yard line at most. Kingsley is barely past the 42 yard line, and he gets called for being offside. Whether and he's like, "Oh no, they had the wrong number," and I'm like, "Yeah, you're right, and it was the wrong color too. It was 76 in purple who was offside." So that
Do
one was
you
bad.
wonder if sometimes that maybe these some refs will call a penalty on the wrong team, and instead of fixing it, they just roll with it?
Oh, absolutely. You get it all the time. Like the genesis, the other proof I have of that is when they're like, you have the one where it's like there is no number 42 on this team. Kind of like you hear it in college and the NFL is like, there's 100 people on this roster and no one is wearing that number. Kind of, it's that thing. And then the other one that was really bad. So and the field goal one, what was really bad is if you're reading LaFleur's lips, he's saying, "I'm standing right here." Like he's literally on the line of scrimmage and he's telling the side judge, "How can you call my guy offside? I'm standing on the line of scrimmage. You're not." It's basically what he's telling the guy is he's like, "I'm standing here looking down the line of scrimmage." Because I think LaFleur is saying if he was offside, I was going to call timeout. But he wasn't. And so yeah, and that's like seeing LaFleur go ballistic over that. I understand why. And then the other one was the the one where they called Wicks for being in illegal formation. That one was horseshit because and I'll try and find the all 22 when it comes out, but the reason he's so they were like, "Oh, he covered up another player," but looking at it, I didn't think Tucker was on the line of scrimmage. I thought he was not in like the true inline tight end. I thought he was the like wing tight end because he would potentially come in motion. And they're like, "Oh, Wicks, he's on the ball," and then he moves back. But it's like, no, if you look at it, he's across the ball, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm fixing it by getting onside." And so that one too, like I was like, I have no idea what the fuck happened on that penalty. And you know, the really unfortunate thing, and everyone's kind of pointing at like, oh, the Packers got the low block thing and all that kind of stuff, but like it's where it comes, it's sort of like cluster luck in baseball where it's like, oh, both teams ended up with 9 hits, but it's like, well, one team got 1 hit in every inning and none of them were home runs, and the other team got 5 hits in one inning and got scored like 3 or 4 runs. And that's what the Vikings did, is like the where theirs came in hand, like the Packers convert a 3rd and 1, but then it gets called back, and then they don't convert 3rd and 6, and then the ensuing drive they get called for the erroneous offside, which gives them a second chance at the field goal kick, and it's like, and that's just it's bad refereeing, and then on top of it, it just kind of shows like the team was, as much as like I wish they had played better in the first half. That's just how you can kind of tell like shit out of luck, Murphy's law, and like everything was conspiring against you, kind of things. So it it goes in the moldy, because I feel like a lot of these like finer point stuff, refs just have gotten worse and worse as the season has gone.
This could be one of those rare times where you could kind of maybe point and say this cost the Packers the game, because had they not called that, quote unquote offside penalty, the field goal would have been no good. And had the rest of the game played out the way it did, we're looking at 25-24 instead of, 27-25.
Yep.
So not saying that, everything would have played out afterwards the same, but and you also have to say that this kind of goes to the decision making. Instead of going for it on 4th down in the red zone, just take the 3 points for the Packers. And I just thought of that one. But anyway, back with the refs, and it's not just for the Packers game. I was watching the Commanders Falcons game, and they called holding on one of the tackles, and we're sitting here watching it. Even I'm talking Collinsworth and Tirico and all, and Pereira, and everybody at home's watching this, and there's no grab, there's no toss, there's no fall, there's nothing, and they called it a friggin' holding penalty. There was he the only thing that they said that could possibly be viewed as why they called it holding was because when the defender was coming in, he came in low and kind of slid, and the tackle slapped him on the back, and it caused him to lurch down a little bit. But there was no holding to it. And everybody's just sitting there questioning it, like, what did we miss something here? So this just goes to what we've said all year when we've talked about the rest. It's not just in Packers games. We can point it out more because of the Packers games, because we're watching them more intent than any other game. But yes, it's not just Packer games. It's just the reffing as a whole.
Yep, I agree, but
I'm gonna
that's
I'm gonna
oh,
create
yeah.
a new segment, and I'll get some sound effects for it later on for when we do it. And it's the moment. And it happened twice that I saw. They dropped Lucas Van Ness into coverage. Now, I don't think it bit him in the butt, but that's similar to dropping Preston Smith into coverage.
And I think that's like, I do wonder how much Halfley would call these zone blitzes if Jair is in the game, because he's hedging his bit. He's trying to create confusion up front and still, still pressure
Well,
with
he
4,
created
but
confusion, all right.
but yeah, so I do wonder if like he just sends that 5th guy if you have Jair back there and stuff, because that's the thing, is like Halfley is more of a, he is his preference is to play man, but he feels like he can't and stuff. And I agree with you. Like, we'll be going back around in circles, but he's got to just bite the bullet and say, like, we're gonna live with it and deal with it, kind of thing. But I
Well,
think,
and if he would have rushed the 5th guy, you know, good pass rushes tend to cover up a lot of mistakes that the secondary makes. But
Yeah.
yes, that we just be rehashing things. But I think we're going to go forward, maybe starting next season, and have a new version of it of like what the hell is going on, or or something, where
Yeah.
it's just a questionable thing. Because last time I knew, even though he's very athletic, it's not a good idea to drop a guy like Lucas Van Ness into coverage.
Yeah.
He had a smooth back pedal, though. I have to give him that.
Yes, he did look very athletic doing it. But we'll put a capper on it tonight. Want to thank you for joining us for tonight's episode. Please check out our website, ohanapackers.org. Please support the show through the shop. Like I always say, Joe's always coming up with really catchy things to put on: cups, sweaters, shirts, tumblers,
I
mugs, you
have a
name
new line that I'm trying to come out with, but I'm trying to perfect it. And I
it.
don't know if I'm going to have it in time for next week's game. So it'll probably have to be more next year. And it's the no wave zone.
Nice. Yep. So keep an eye out for that one. Get the coffee too. Follow the show on your favorite social media, on Twitter at Ohana_Packers, on Instagram at Ohana Packers Edition. Search us on Facebook. Follow the podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Please give us a like and a subscribe. And please give us any and all of your comments. We want to make sure we're putting out the content you're looking for. The Packers, they'll go into week 18 playing for, well, okay, they still can play for the 6th seed, but they're going to need help from the Cowboys, of all people, to beat the Commanders, since the Commanders won Sunday night. So Packers are still trying to stay out of that 7th spot, but it's not in their control because they let go of the rope tonight. But that's Iowa Joe. I'm Mike. Go Pack Go, and aloha.
Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for OPE. Let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for OPE. You know who wanna go, gonna glow.